Welcome to 2024 Our Story, a podcast exploring what it's like to be attending Scripps College in a moment when the world is recovering from a global pandemic. I'm Ellen.
And I'm Alyssa.
And today we are jumping out of our mental health resources and mental health issues in a way. In part of this is also kind of related to that. But we wanted to talk about something that has been really important for us as we've entered the college sphere. And that is finding your people.
For me, I think finding your people is different for a lot of people. That was a weird sentence. But I feel like it's different to interact with a lot of people and have people who are acquaintances or even just like casual friends. I feel like your people are people that you like connect with on a deeper level, whether that stems from having like a similar identity and you just like find kind of like a safe space with them, or it can just be people who like are there for you and you know that like you just like connect, I think, just on a deeper level, you know, like you really can rely on these people, and that's kind of how it is for me, although I'm sure that the experience is a little bit different for other people. So how about you, Ellen? What's like finding your people mean to you?
See, you ask the good questions, Alyssa. I mean, I think one of the things growing up that my mom, when we were talking about college, that my mom really pushed for me to think about was how college wasn't just about academics. It was very much about finding a support system that would help you and who you would stay in contact with even after college. Because I think that was really big for her. And that's something that I've kept in mind over these past few months. And so for me, I focused very much on who was going to be there for me when everything felt like it was falling apart, and who I knew I could be there for in the case that was going to happen. And so for me, I think also finding my people, like you mentioned, is very much based on my identity as an APITA student. And so a lot of my finding my people has been through, I feel like I've talked about this a lot. I just keep repeating myself.
I don't think it's that much.
Which is okay, that's good.
It's important to you, which means it's good to talk about.
Oh, thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate that. But yeah, no, I've definitely, most of my my closer friends right now, I've made through ASP, which is the Asian American Sponsor Program on campus. And I think in part that is due to the fact that we spend at least an hour every weekend together. But also the fact that like going into meeting each other on campus, we had these trainings that we had to go through. Like I think it was the week before we came here, and so we were with each other for hours on end over Zoom for a really long time. And when we got here, I think a lot of us were concerned about whether we would have people to come to and talk to, which I don't personally feel was the case for me. But I think having that connection over Zoom and having them automatically come together during, I think specifically over matriculation, was really big for me. And I think that was the place where I really felt like these are going to be some of the most important people in my life for at least this amount of time. Because let's be completely honest, people come into your life and sometimes they come out. And that's also something that I think has been really important for me to think about as we do go through this.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we find people through these kinds of organizations, right? But sometimes it's kind of like random. I feel like
that's very true.
Not to make it all about just the two of us, but isn't that what we're here for, though? No, kind of, not really. But I do feel like looking back, it's really interesting that sometimes the people I am the closest to and who end up being the biggest parts of my life and kind of like they are my people are people who just randomly come into my life. Like it just happened that I had class with you in summer. Like no, like Scripps doesn't do summer classes. Like that's not a thing that they do anymore. They only did it because of COVID and being online. So what are the chances that we signed up for the exact same class. And then we
Mhm.
start talking, and out of everybody I met, which there were some very, very lovely people that we met, I really just like ended up connecting so well with you. And I just think it's like so funny how sometimes it's when you don't try too that
Mhm.
people just end up coming into your life. Although I do think like organizations, which is probably something we'll talk about in the future, like that is something that really does help because you have a great, like a really strong foundation of understanding between you guys, even though, you know, everyone's experiences are different. But I do think it's not to gush about Ellen and her being
Ellen and
one of my people,
Alyssa.
but it really was
No, yeah,
great.
I completely agree with that. Like, Alyssa, you are one of my people. But yeah,
Mhm.
Alyssa, what do you look for when you're trying to find your people?
Um, Personally, I have had, like we've talked about, I've had people like super important people come and go in my life. I feel like the special thing about finding your people instead of just like kind of like a more casual friend is that even if they do come and go in your life, you still have that connection with them. So I personally, I don't think I really looked because I've been very fortunate that it just has happened, which is not the most helpful advice, but, I do feel like in moments of, like well, I guess I could say that, like, in the beginning of orientation this year, I've talked about this before, but, like, I am not one to really reach out first to people, but I did take that leap and I took that chance, and that did lead me to finding my group of friends and some of my people on campus. So I do think, like, a good strategy would be to, like, just kind of, like, be willing to maybe put yourself out there, and I think transitioning from being friends to like having people that you really, really can rely on and will be there for you, even if you don't like talk for a long time or things like that. Like I do think it comes from letting yourself be vulnerable, which of course is very scary and looks different for lots of people. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how it's been like for me.
Yeah, no,
How's
I
it
love
been for
that.
you, Ellen?
I think what you said about the transition period between being friends and then to considering someone like a good friend or someone who is like your person or your support system is like one of those things that is so bizarre in how it happens because in so many situations something bad is usually the catalyst for bam,
Yeah.
look, we're together, we're going through this, you're here for me, I'm here for you.
Hmm.
Like I think being someone who really shows that they're in it, like they're 100% willing to be there for you no matter what. I think honestly, it is those big moments. And I guess they don't necessarily have to be big, but if it's a big moment that happens and you're there to either support the person or just stand by them, it's really important in building
Hmm.
that relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I would consider Ari to be one of my closest friends. And I think one of the things that really got us closer was the fact that we both, like, even over Zoom, when I was very introverted, as Alyssa already knows, I was like, oh, we have to schedule calls. I'm going to talk to Alyssa. That's it. Ari would like randomly call me over Zoom and I'd be like, hi. And she put in the effort, which I really appreciated. And now that we're together, like it's very much, I think we reciprocate the effort towards each other. And having that really has helped me figure out who I can trust and who I can be
Mhm.
100% in for. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I do think that's so important. Just noting like people are different, so of course effort means different things and looks like different for people depending on what they're used to, what they're comfortable with. But I do think that putting in effort, especially like being online and being distanced from people, I think that really did show like kind of how difficult it is to put in effort. Even me, like I like there's people I care about so so much, and sometimes it's really hard to like reach out, but just putting in that effort can be really important. I do think
Mhm.
it's kind of a little bit, well, it's kind of on topic, but I do think that um, I think moments of not being afraid to kind of like reflect in yourself who the people are that you want to keep in your life. Because I think at this point in our lives, being in college and being young adults, we do get to kind of navigate, but also make more decisions on who we surround ourselves with. And that can be really hard. Like some people you want to, there's like so many great people, right? But doesn't mean you don't have to have like this really small support system. Personally, I'm really comfortable with like having like a small support system. So that's how it's always been for me. But I do
Mhm.
think like not being afraid to kind of reflect and being like, who are the people that I would call if this
Yeah.
happened or something? Like, who are the people that I want to tell these things to? And it doesn't make anybody else like less of a friend to you, but it's kind of it's an interesting spot to be in where you are deciding kind of like who you're gonna trust and to what extent, because that's
Mhm.
like really brave, I think, for people to do, to really put themselves out there. I know like I really bonded with Ellen. Um, by like college is
Mhm.
hard and going to college is hard and you experience like really new things. So, something big happened to me and just like it doesn't have to be like a shared experience, but just like I wanted to share it with Ellen, and that really did, I think, bring us closer. So I think just like it doesn't have to be shared, but that was two different points.
But no, I do think that your question about, or your point about asking yourself who would you call in this, like, in an emergency, is such an interesting thing that I hadn't considered before. But like it is a very good point. We're all in this new situation. Your parents, like your parents aren't gonna drive like 6 hours to come get you in, like,
Mhm.
if you need something. So you have to have an emergency contact or someone who you can be with or who will take care of you.
Mhm.
And that's so important. And I think that that does tie very well into to finding your people, you
Yeah,
know?
and it does change, as our
Mhm.
problems change, going from
Problems
middle like thinking
change.
about what I was struggling with in middle school, like
Mhm.
those problems are very different now. And I just think it just continues to kind of transform as you do, and the people around you naturally, like that's gonna also change, and not being
Yeah.
afraid to like kind of let go when needed, and like not forcing anything, but kind of letting things naturally run their course can be pretty difficult. Because I don't know, I think a lot of people don't really like change, myself included. So it can be really
That's
difficult.
true. Yeah, I agree. Change is not my friend. Or it can't be my friend. I should try and make it my friend. But
Different
currently it
mindset,
is one.
yes.
Exactly. Open mindset, growing mindset. But
Hmm.
I agree with that. I think that is such a wise thing to say, Alyssa. Like, I
Thanks.
think I feel like over Zoom, when we hadn't really met anyone. Let's be completely honest. We
Hmm.
had very limited circles to meet people through. And so I think I latched on to certain people assuming that, like, at that time that's who I was going to be friends with when we got here, because those were the people I talked to so often over like text and whatever. And when we stopped texting, I think I personally, this was still over Zoom, when we were still on Zoom, I think I had a hard time like navigating that and figuring out, hey, these people, like, people do come in and out of your life, and they come into your life for a reason, or maybe they don't, but they were important to me at that time, and I value them very much for how they supported me at that time. But things are the world changes, and so even if you feel like you have a support system now, you should also be open to the fact that maybe that's going to change, and maybe you'll find other people who will play just as important of roles or even more important roles in your life in the future. I
Yeah.
think that was something hard for me, but which has been extremely useful while we've been here.
Oh, well, that's good. That's like a hard thing to realize and kind of work through. So I'm glad that you've been able to do that.
Ah, thank you.
Good job, Ellen.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that, Alyssa.
I do think this is like kind of something we've never really talked about, but I think like as again, like as you grow older and things and your circles kind of change, I also think that like having a significant other can
Mhm.
also really change what like is considered as your people, kind of.
Yeah, that's very
Because
true.
as a person who enjoys people watching and kind of like observing what people
Mhm.
do, easier than trying to experience it myself, that's for sure. But I do think it's interesting. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, there's no really like wrong thing to do. But it is
Mhm.
interesting to see how like people will sometimes, again, not like it's not bad. It's just that people do get really caught up in like new relationships and things. And it's like, I'm definitely guilty of this too, kind of being consumed by like one person, whether it is like a significant other or not, just being like
Mhm.
completely reliant on one person can actually be really draining in the future as well and in the present. Like, I know um when I was younger and going through a hard time, I really like would latch on to like one person because I was like, oh, nobody else understands. Like, I can't imagine anybody else like being able to be this close to me and stuff. And
Mhm.
I just thought it was such a limiting perspective for myself, you know? And I also feel like
Mhm.
it put an unnecessary pressure on the other person too, you know? So for me,
That's
I
true.
do think like finding my people, it is kind of also me realizing that it doesn't have to be just one person, or maybe also like making sure that you do put in effort too with other people, because even in the moment when your life is totally revolved around like maybe one person, in the future that may not be the case. We don't really like thinking about that or talking about that, but it does happen. So I
Mhm.
think like maintaining a support system for yourself can also be like hard. You think it wouldn't be so hard because you are so close to these people, and they are like the people that you want to be in your life. But it is really hard. And I think like you have to maintain these relationships. And maybe that's even harder than finding them, you know?
That's such a good point. Yeah. I think it's so easy, especially when you're here and you see so many people doing so much and you're just like, I gotta do so much. It's hard to set aside time to spend time with friends. Like, I know Alyssa already knows this. I love to schedule my calendar. And in my calendar, I set aside time for socializing. And a lot of that time is at meals, which I find is the easiest time to like talk, sit down and talk to people, but not a lot of time outside of those. So I think that's one of the things I have to work on is setting aside more time to be social outside of just sitting down and eating with people. Um, but yeah, no, I think that's such a good point that you touched on as well, Alyssa, in terms of having significant others and how that may impact dynamics in terms of finding people. Uh, but I will say, like, if you do find that person, that's also another support system.
I think with like college and stuff and having a new environment and new people can be really hard too. I mean, just right now, my home best friend, with the help of Ellen, literally making me ugly cry from it because I was so happy. But my like from home best friend, like I could gush about her. I love her. And she is like my person, in the strongest sense. Like, it's just so crazy to have like people who would do so much for you. Sometimes it just like completely blows my mind that you could like have someone who cares that much, you know? But I do think like it's hard to find that dynamic between like new people that you're growing relationships with, and you are trying to distinguish kind of like who are my people from this crowd that I've met, because you meet a lot of people in college, but it's hard to kind of
Very true.
find those people within the crowd. Not that you're limited to like a small number of people, but it's also hard to like kind of navigate both your new relationships and your old ones. I do think like a part of me felt guilty for like setting aside time to kind of connect with like my best friend from home, while I'm still trying to like maintain these in college friendships. But really, I don't know, I just like kind of took a step back, and personally I was like, well, they're like, you don't have to limit yourself to just certain people, and if people are like your friends and if they care about you, they also want you to be around other people who also care about you, you know? So it is hard, I think, personally, like I didn't have to think about it before, because she wasn't actually like here with me. But I just think like, I don't know, it was really great to be like, I can do multiple things and not feel bad about it. I can have these different people who care about me and not feel bad about like spending time with all of them, you know?
That's very true. You get to make your decisions.
And I do think that's really hard.
2024 Our Story is published through Scripps Communities of Resources and Empowerment. This episode was edited by Ellen Hu, and Instagram graphics are designed by Alyssa Wend. Callie is courtesy of Wadaboy on Pixabay. If you are interested in joining us on an episode, please fill out the Google form available within our link tree. You can find that link as well as more content on our Instagram page at 2024 Our Story Podcast. Be on the lookout for SCORE's November programs on Instagram and in your school inboxes. That's everything we have for you today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye!